Good morning, Leslie and Jose. I hope you are having a good Sunday morning and that you've had a great week. So this week's readings, again, for me, the biggest point is the unlearning. I think in my training to be a teacher, my years in the classroom, and even with my instructional opportunities within the university, I focus so much on what I'm going to teach rather than what I know to be true and why I know that to be true. And so I pass that on to my students, right? We think so much about what we need to learn to teach instead of how we need to teach our students to really question what they know. You know, what's on your Oprah list of things you know for sure, right? So I think too, when Gorski had the 4 points of equity literacy, the recognize, respond, redress, create, and sustain, that's why the recognize is so important, because if we don't recognize that, then everything that stems from that is not necessarily ineffective, but much less effective than it could be. It's like how we see the problem determines how we're going to resolve it or solve it. So if we don't see it in that frame, we're not going to be effective in our solutions. So that really hit home for me. It was kind of like how we might be dressing a wound that we have without giving an antibiotic to clean up the bacteria underneath. So we keep doing these topical approaches, and it doesn't mean they're not helping, but they're really not solving the problem, and they may be harming as well. In fact, when he was giving examples of things that may be done with good intentions but are absolutely not addressing equity, the simple things like when you sell things at school. Well, I've always known that that's a bad idea, especially for kids who go home and, you know, they don't have people around them that are going to buy these candy bars or buy this wrapping paper or whatever. And, you know, people expect them to not only sell it, but they expect it to be returned as is when somebody might go home and the kid eats a candy bar, their little sister or whatever. So, I mean, it just creates issues. But on the other hand, I know one time my children had the opportunity to go on a trip, but they didn't take it because they said everybody couldn't afford it. And so what I thought was, how can we make it so that everybody contributes or everybody works in fundraisers to go toward the trip so that everybody has that opportunity. But even then, I know that gets sticky. So that was a little ramble. But so how do we unlearn? And I think that's why embodied learning is so important. I know that when we first read all the articles initially, I couldn't really grasp the importance of that, but the way that we can draw on that is we unlearn, one, by connection, and two, just by listening to our body and learning why we have certain responses. So if you look at the first way of connection and feeling, I was fortunate enough to go to a training on EQ and the instrument EQI, which is emotional intelligence. And basically, there are ways that we can use our emotions. They serve us or they're not serving us well, and that can lead to success or failure. And we can look at those skills with our emotions and actually increase them. And anyway, so we are emotional beings. And some of the skills that he spoke of with the people in poverty, like they're better at sharing, they're better at empathizing, recognizing, being in community, those are actually skills that promote success. So that's one way that you could look at strengths and resilience in the way that he talked about it. The other way of learning through these feelings is really thinking about why we're uncomfortable. Why are we uncomfortable discussing poverty and these issues if we really believe it's structural and not based on the individual? And I think one reason that is true is because we think if we take that individualism out, that we're really decreasing their self-efficacy. And I'm going to think about that and explore that a lot more, but I think that's a good point. And the last point that I wanted to make was that when we talk about, I also talk a lot about strengths with my students, and we do the Clifton Strengths Finder as a model and an assessment. And what happens with that is you have talents, but they don't turn into strengths unless you have the investment. Okay, so if somebody has a talent and they don't get to invest their time in that talent, it won't become a strength. So if we don't try to equalize the playing field, then those kids that have talents in these underfunded areas with less resources and less experienced teachers, they're never going to have this eye so that they can develop these strengths. So that was my last point, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.